Change lives.
cambiar vidas,
Change lives.
change organizations,
حياته.
改变世
Change
界
organization.
Dunia berbelau.
Change the world.
This is a picture of a flower, right? This is a garden. Yes, but to me, they're much, much more. Why? When I was a kid, my mom used to spend countless hours outside of our suburban home in Fort Wayne, Indiana, tending to her flower queendom. She would buzz around our silent suburban home, sprinkling little drops of love on each of her magnolia children like some sort of Twilight Tinkerbell. She was an artist. This is a picture of a street in Kingston, Jamaica, where my mother grew up. That's a ballerina bar, where she spent a lot of her life as well. I was told she was shy, soft-spoken, and self-conscious in the streets of Jamaica. I was also told that she was an execution expert, determined, and focused in the ballet studio. Now, I came to meet my mother years later when she raised me in Fort Wayne, Indiana, when the execution expert from the ballerina studios, the lover of flowers, and the shy girl from the streets of Kingston, Jamaica, all came together in a beautiful mosaic that I know and love, this composite of a personality that is my mother. This is Dad. I like to call him Pops. This is a picture we took last year down on the coast. This is the first time he'd been to California. He's from Memphis, went to school in Atlanta, then went to work in Chicago, raised me in Fort Wayne, Indiana. But here, this was his first time in the Pacific side of the country. And this is a regular picture, right? No. Something different is happening here to my dad. How do I know this? A couple of months after this trip, I said, Dad, after that quiet road trip you and I took, how did you feel that day? Who were you? He hesitated, as is his way, and he said, I was colorful. I was natural. Now, I don't know if you've met my dad, but these are not words he used to describe himself. So that got me to thinking, what is the role that place plays in shaping us, in shaping our personalities? I thought some more and I wondered, how could I, better yet, how could we think about how we could investigate ourselves and unlock a new dimension by thinking of the association of place and personality? So I let that question and that idea marinate a little bit, and many epiphanies started to bubble up. Maybe a more holistic way to tell your personal story, your personal history. Or maybe a new way to look at spatial, personality, and emotional landscapes, ways to self-explore and to self-explain. So I thought about this, and I said, let me explore this with my dad. Let me talk to my dad. So I said, Dad, who were you in Memphis? He says, oh, I was quiet. I was timid. I was very mild-mannered. You know, Julian, we played the first interracial high school football game there. It was the all-black high school, my high school, Douglas, versus an all-white high school. In the first quarter, we were scared to tackle each other. Well then, what after that? Then I went to Atlanta, where I was at Morehouse. I was confident, outspoken, inspired. I was inspiring. It's fascinating. And then I went to Chicago. In Chicago, my father tells me the hum of the city streets at that perfect pitch made him feel flashy, vibrant, and debonair. Now, this exchange with my dad was enjoyable, of course. But more interestingly, as I revisited the conversation, I realized something special about my dad's perspective. He saw the world and his personality shifts through racescapes. In Memphis, he was quiet, mild-mannered, as he would allude to by the reverberations of the civil rights movement that he could feel shaking through the classroom walls and bubbling up through the football fields. In Atlanta, he'd be inspired by black professionals, doctors, lawyers, professors. He became outspoken. He found his voice. He found community. In Chicago, he was a young professional, flashy on the streets, and instead of defining the city in relation to the Gold Coast, he saw it lined with inspired and motivated black workers. This made me think. I learned more about my dad. It unlocked a whole new doorway into our relationship, a whole new understanding. As I thought about this understanding, I thought about how could we unlock the people we are based on the places we've been? How could we visually represent who we are and our personalities based on our emotional experiences? And like that, it was a vision, a new map to depict us, where we've been, and who we are. A new map that can cradle the grandeur and the magnitude and the diversity of a life's journey in a compelling visual icon. Me, personally, I love maps. You don't have to, but you should reconsider. Why? Because we're visual people. Admit that. Understand that. As humans, we love stories, and maps, with their beginning and ending points, are room for infinite story creation, every day, at every turn, at every look. Maps tell us where we are, where we've been, and if we're lucky and paying attention, where we've changed in between. This is a map by Cameron Booth. It's a good design and it's got a lot of acclaim recently. Why? Some people say it's because he's taken the confusing and winding topographical reality of the US highway system and replaced it with the iconic vocabulary of the London Tube network. It changes the way we look at our world. For me, it's good design because it changes the way I tell a story. It's immersive, it's imaginative. When I think about good maps, I remember walks in DC, walks in New York City. Good maps make me move through space physically. And if they're well designed, they help me get there mentally. But what about emotionally? What if you had a map to understand how your husband felt when he was going through his emotional rocky mountains? You could help him traverse those tough times or navigate through them. An emotional map could help us unlock people in new ways. I have this hypothesis that place holds the code to our personalities. And if we understand people and how they are in places, we can unlock them in new ways. All I'm asking you today is to look at people, look at yourselves in a little bit of a different way. Think about representing a person based on the places they've been. If you look at people and experiences in a slightly different way, I think you could turn the world on its head, or at least rotate it just enough to gain new insights. So I engaged in this exercise. I sat down with a friend, Cece. She grew up in suburban Chicago. And I said, tell me what suburban Chicago was for you, Cece. I was hoping to unlock her personality through a translation of that place. She said, we played bottle rockets. I was the youngest of 4 kids. We played Ghosts in the Graveyard. And I was always trying to find my voice. I was blonde-haired, I was bubbly, and I was spunky. That's where I became spunky. I said, Cece, could you tell me in one image what that emotion was like? She said, jumping on a trampoline outside of my parents' colonial home. So this is a crude rendering. I did this, I'm no artist. But after we sat down together, it helped me understand who Cece was today, my friend, the person I knew, and that bounding personality that she has comes through in this trampoline image, comes through in her finding her voice amongst her brothers and sisters. We explored more, and I said, tell me more, Cece. She said, later in life, I went to Morocco. As a blonde-haired girl, I'd find myself in a dark souk, colored and covered and surrounded by darker faces, and I was scared. I was really scared. Now, in Morocco, Cece didn't think about the steep grade of the Atlas Mountains. Instead, she thought about the slopes of self-honesty. She said, is it possible, maybe, that I'm prejudiced? That I've been socialized in a certain way towards other races? Now, this was a monumentous locational turning point for Cece, and forever, I think maybe, just maybe, self-honesty and self-exploration will be tied to that souk in Morocco. And now, by understanding this and this picture, I know a little bit more about Cece, her code of place, her code of personality, and the person I'm friends with today. You know, the interesting thing about this exercise is that I got to sit down with a couple of friends. There's another friend, Kay, and I learned numerous things about her. I learned how she is someone who likes rules and likes being safe, but doesn't like feeling boxed in. Someone who likes to plan. She has a propensity for planning, but on many occasions has been wooed by the sirens of serendipity. Someone who had a good time finding themselves in the east side of the country, but has tensions with cities like New York because she suffers from the tension between social stimulation and the lack of solar infatuation. And Kay is someone who likes to feel special for no apparent reason at all. This is a rendering I did after speaking with Kay. We had a long, deep conversation, and she told me about her childhood in suburban Detroit, where she felt covered in a bubble, overshadowed by her older sister and protected by suburbia. She then traveled to upstate New York, where her college was on a physical hill, but that came to represent a metaphorical hill of her climbing up her own mountain of individuality and self-actualization. She then goes to New York, where she dealt with the barren professional landscape of New York and New Jersey, and she would take wishful excursions to New York on the weekends, where she would deal with that tension of a claustrophobic place where memories faded too fast. She said, "Julian, New York is always going to hold this tension for me. It's a place where I have friends and family I feel like I should be, but it always holds this claustrophobic feeling, and I can't shake that." And then we revisit brighter times in LA, where on the plane ride there, she felt like a star, just because. So as I thought about my interaction with Kay, I said 3 things to myself. 1, what next? Where do I go from here? Could I help her recreate and keep creating a map to tell her spatial and emotional trajectory through life as she evolved? Could I give her an artifact, a calling card, something to talk about over dinner, maybe a more colorful Myers-Briggs? I worked with a local artist and created this for Kay. So far, it's a work in progress, but it's a story of her life up to this point. It helps me understand how I know her. And then that's the second point, how I know Kay. Now I can be a better friend to Kay. Why is that? Because if we're heading towards a situation that feels reminiscent of the tensions of New York City, we can take an emotional exit ramp at a place that reminds her of the sunny times in LA. And third, I think, why not me? Why not us? Does this mapping framework help us think about our lives in a new way? Maybe. I mean, personally, I started to do the non-trivial unpacking of my life through this process. I'm from Indiana, a boring state where I was in the back of a minivan most of my life, trying to go somewhere, trying to achieve something. And I guess I would, because I go to Rhode Island, where I played college soccer and lived through the soccer field and developed the work ethic of a college athlete that I'd like to think I still have today. I spent a year in Africa where I discover my inner poet, and then I go and work in New York City, where at once, every day, I was the walking proof of accomplishment, but the vulnerability of lost imagination. And I'd rediscover that imagination in Brazil, where I found my cultural junkie. And today, I'm here in California. So ask yourselves, who are you right now? Why is it that musicians and artists are the only ones that go to places for inspiration and motivation? Why not regular people? Why not me? Why not you? All I want you to do today is 2 things, or 2 words. Embrace place. Why? Because it's important for yourself, for your personality development, and for your connections with people you love. So I thought about this when I started this project, and I wasn't sure where it was going. I said, maybe I'll create a new way for people to understand their physical environment. Maybe they'll understand landscapes and it'll be more specified for them. I'm not sure I'm there yet. But maybe it's just an imaginative exercise. And maybe it's not going to be $1 million enterprise, but I'm encouraged because I think it's a way for the self to be re-realized. Or maybe it's just a way for me to get to know my dad better. Or a way for you to get to know you better. I've passed out some sheets, or my good friend Katie has passed out some sheets with 2 maps on each side. I'm going to give you some homework. I want you to map out yourself, your personality trajectory, over coffee, alone or with a friend, over dinner, and tell me what you find. Call me if you need help. I'd love to help you get to know you better, and I'm sure I'd love to get to know you myself as well. Thanks.